And welcome to the SpartanMag.com. VCast Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Perlis Plaza, Michigan State University. Michigan State getting ready to play Oregon. What's Oregon, number 6 in the country, number 8 in the country? Then number 8 last week. I think they might be number 6 now. Second straight week, Michigan State playing a high top 10 team. Last week against Ohio State, we talked about in the VCast after the game. Michigan State competed favorably against Ohio State, losing 38-7, but it could have been a 38-20 type of game. Michigan State, you all saw it. They competed pretty favorably considering the score. But when we got Konyndyk here, Paul Konyndyk, SpartanMag.com. As a matter of fact, hey, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. Also, go check us out as we cover this team. They're 3-2. Played good football last weekend. They could play good football this weekend. Go out to Oregon, not going to win, but there's a confidence level. I've never seen a team lose 38-7, come out of it and feel like they established some things. They feel like they're close. Talking to Jordan Turner today after practice, he feels like they're close. I'm sure Aiden Childs feels the same way. It's one thing about getting tested that early by one of the best teams in the country, and you go toe-to-toe with them for quite a while. Doesn't end up in points. But they competed with Ohio State. Now they get on 6 days' notice going on the road to try to do it again. And they're going out there thinking they can win this game, Paul.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game. Obviously, yes. It's a Friday game. It's out there, so you're traveling a long distance. Michigan State's coming off two tough games, 2 back-to-back night games, 2 emotional games. But there's a lot on film that they're looking at that they can grow from. I think the number one thing that gives you positive on both sides of the football, for offense, is that they, in that first half they showed that they could move the football. They were down in the red zone on multiple occasions. Got down there 4 times in the first half, 2 turnovers obviously, and 4th down stoppage, which is essentially a turnover, but. And then the 1 touchdown. So the idea that they can move, came out and with the stuff that they had schemed up, the scripted plays, they were able to move the ball down the field pretty effectively. They got in their own way, but that's a positive for the offense. Defensively, there was never a time in this game where they got beat by skill, but they weren't out physicaled. And I think, so when you talk about Jordan Turner being positive, the fact that you can go back and look on film and they can say, yeah, this guy made a great play. Jeremiah Rivers made a great one-handed grab, but you're not absolutely getting destroyed on it. You're not getting pushed off the ball like 5 or 6 yards, like I said in the VCast. And I think when you're in defense and your whole idea is physicality, rallying to the football, all those things that being sound, making people work for scores, all those things that I just mentioned. The one thing that can't fall apart for you is the physicality piece. The demoralizing thing is if you get destroyed, if you have an offensive line that just caves you in, that kind of shatters the mirror and changes your entire perception of yourself. Michigan State isn't any different now than they were before Ohio State. They believe that they're physical, tough, defense is going to make people hurt after they play them, and that hasn't changed after playing Ohio State. And I'm not sure what's going to happen in Oregon, but that's a really difficult place to play. They've got a lot of ability, and it's a kind of a quick turnaround. So who knows what's going to happen? But these guys haven't lost faith or confidence in themselves, and I think there's also an expectation in a year one of a football program. You're still learning, you're still building, you're still trying to kind of put everything together. So there's a newness to this program that they're going to be able to take some punches that maybe a team that's been around for 4 or 5 years isn't going to be able to handle.
And there's teaching. Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator, was talking about a couple of the explosive plays that they allowed. And Ohio State specialized in explosive plays. And Michigan State did not give up a play of over 40 yards, which might not sound like a big deal, but Ohio State, in the previous 2 games, had, I think, 7 plays of more than 40 yards and about 4 or 5 of more than 60 yards. So Michigan State kept a handle on that. Now, there was a running play that got out with Henderson for about 36 yards. Rossi mentioned that. We didn't lever it quite well enough. That's what he said about his team. Going back and looking at that was Anthony Jones kind of ducking back in. It looked like the running back was going to the other side. It gets back to doing your job. We talked about that in the Boston College game when Cal Halliday had an error in that regard with the collision with the run play that got outside. So over the course of time, when you're a defensive coordinator and you're hammering those things, do your job, you're going to get less and less slippage. Halliday, he's a veteran, but still a 1-year guy in this program. Anthony Jones, new to this program, but he played a lot at Indiana last year. Those things, you get to where you don't have to correct those anymore, then you have a better chance to even become even more consistent on defense. They played well on defense. And the part that I was impressed with, right after they went down 24-7, Michigan State punts it back to them, and Ohio State's got the ball early third quarter, up 24-7, and Ohio State made a concerted effort to get the ball going on the ground. And Michigan State, stopped them. gave up a little 7-yard run that created 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 3, and Halliday I thought was held on that play, didn't get called. 3rd and 3, they're running inside, stop them for a gain of 2. 3rd and 1, stop them for no gain. 4th and 1, stop them for no gain, but they get the first down maybe by an inch. But I mean, 3, outside zone this way, inside this way, outside zone that way. And Michigan State repeatedly in that drive, stopping them, gain of 2, gain of 0, gain of 2, gain of 1, but they pick up the 4th down. Then they get another 4th down. They score a touchdown on a 4th and 5, 30-yard crossing route, really back-breaking to make it 31-7. To go down 31-7 and to play toe-to-toe with that offense, with those running backs, when Jonathan Smith said after the game that he was happy with the way that they battled, that's what he's talking about. And that's usually when a team kind of buckles, and like you said, you kind of surrender to the physicality, and you just don't have anything left. Michigan State had plenty left there, and it was Jalen Satchel and Ben Roberts coming off the bench as second-string defensive tackles, holding firm on short yardage plays. And I'll tell you what, Paul, over the years in the pre-snap read, when D'Antonio had really good teams, and Michigan State's getting ready to play an Iowa team that might be 2-2. And I'd write in the pre-snap read, don't be fooled by that record. Iowa is tough as nails. This is going to be a struggle. And, some readers might say, man, you're crazy. We're going to beat them. I'm just telling you, Iowa looks good on film, better than their record. Michigan State's getting to the point where if I was doing a pre-snap read for Oregon, I'd be cautioning the Oregon fans, hey, they're 3-2. They just lost 38-7, but believe me, they're going to be a live opponent. Now, maybe it won't show itself this week. You're going on the road for a top 10 team, and things can get sideways, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But this Michigan State team, I think the Ohio State people would say they're better than 3-2, depending on what your schedule is, and better than 38-7. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I don't know if Ohio State writers would say that.
Because Ohio State players.
Right. But you knew that. I think you're getting to the point. I made this point a couple times, but I think you're getting to the point where
and coaches.
You come away from playing Michigan State, and you know that you played Michigan State. And that was always a constant during the D'Antonio era. I know people really didn't like some of it, but they showed up every week and they saddled up and they played physical brand of football, and they played with a lot of pride, regardless of the outcome or the scenario. And I think Michigan State's done a good job with it. You mentioned Roberts and Satchel. Maverick Hansen went down in that game, and Michigan State, to their credit, they've done a really good job developing defensive line depth, because like when we talk about teams caving in and kind of giving way, I don't think you can do what Michigan State did and play salty against the run and be stout if you're only playing 3 defensive tackles. That like when you have guys like Simeon Barrow and Derek Harmon and maybe Maverick Hansen, no one else, that's when you kind of fall apart, where those guys are trying, they're giving their best, but you can't bring it every single play. Michigan State's done a nice job of, even though this is a developing, building program, of being committed to rotating guys in there, and it's benefited all parties, I believe.
Right. And as far as Oregon goes, Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback, 81% completion percentage, best in the country. And when you watch him, it's like Jonathan Smith said yesterday. It's not just the accuracy, but he puts it where it's pinpoint accuracy to where a guy can catch it and get forward and run with it, which is what a lot of what Drew Brees used to do with his crazy accuracy, where he, a little flare goes for 9 yards instead of 4 yards because it's so accurate and catch it and move and run. With Oregon playing there loud at night, everybody knows Autzen Stadium doesn't necessarily seat a lot of people, but it's noisy and it's lively, and they're like any home football team, they will feed off of that. So you can play well against Oregon, but with the way the quarterback can click and get completions going, and then it can kind of snowball on you, then when you're on offense, there's crowd noise, it becomes harder to execute than it was here, believe it or not, even though Ohio State theoretically has a better defense than Oregon does. When you're on the road with noise, that'll be different and more difficult to execute theoretically than it was against Ohio State. So that game against Oregon could get out of hand on the scoreboard just like the Ohio State one did, even though Oregon might not be as good as Ohio State in some ways. But Dylan Gabriel, with his ability to just complete, and move the ball, matriculate the ball down the field as Hank Stram would be, is an issue. That being said, I've watched them against UCLA and Oregon State, just parts of it. I've not watched the whole game, but UCLA and Oregon State have bad defenses.
I agree.
So, bad defenses. So Michigan State's going to be better than that. They're going to offer more resistance than that. Whether that can stack up to remaining competitive in a road situation, that's going to be difficult. In a neutral site, I think Michigan State could go toe-to-toe with them, just like they did against Ohio State, and the score would be more reflective of the competitiveness of what was going on the line of scrimmage. What happens on the road in a night game remains to be seen with Childs in a real in something that's more challenging than was at Boston College in terms of crowd noise and the level of competition.
Yeah, I think one of the things that it's really tough for any quarterback, but a young quarterback, especially going into a loud stadium like Autzen, even a veteran quarterback, he's like when you get to the line of scrimmage and you want to change direction of the run play or something like that, it's the subtle, based on what the defense is showing pre-snap, it's those subtle kind of like adjustment type calls that really kind of fall apart when you've got as much noise as you've got in Autzen. And like you talk about the defense being better, and I agree. But for this to even be a competitive game, Michigan State's got to be able to move the ball on offense, and they've got to avoid. They've got to convert in more red zone chances.
That red zone thing. Last year at Oregon State, they lived through Jack Velling in the red zone,
right.
And Velling fumbles down to the 10-yard line after a real nice catch, real nice play call. It's 26-yard gain. You fumble at the 10. But the red zone thing, I kind of think it's like an outlier type thing because it's a different thing every time. It's not like one thing that goes wrong.
I'll tell you what I think you can do with the whole the red zone thing, and I'll call it. Some of it's just some of it's just you've got different guys making mistakes. Like you were saying, so there's not a consistent vein. The one consistent vein I would say would be the turnovers, and that's something I think it can be corrected because like a lot of big turnovers this year for Michigan State have happened in the red zone. That's kind of fluky. You don't necessarily expect it, but like with the Velling fumble, the Childs, the face mask thing. I mean, he can't avoid that, but I do think you can clean up some of those turnovers. If you can eliminate some of those turnovers, then I think that takes care of the red zone a little bit. But I also think you got to play within yourself, and you can't try to do too much. Sometimes I know like against high scoring teams, the vibe out there is that we can't kick field goals. But I'd much rather come away with something, and and not give the other team a short field, or give them a chance to return an interception or something than nothing. And I think the turnover aspect, I think that can get fixed.
Right. And the 4th and 1, Brian Lindgren, Michigan State's offensive coordinator, he spoke with us a few minutes ago. He had an interesting comment about the 4th and 1 situation. And I saw them do this at Oregon State a couple times last year, where it's a 4th down situation. They are in a huddle, and they break from the huddle once in a while, and they sprint from the huddle, and they snap it quickly. And it sounded to me like that's kind of what they wanted to do on that one. Lindgren said we wanted to, get into the operation quickly. Instead, there's a little bit of cadence going on, and it allows Ohio State to reduce into that double eagle look, and it becomes a bear front. And take it on that center head up, standing him up, and then the linebacker over the top. Lindgren said, first of all, we needed to do that more quickly. Secondly, with the way they were reduced in there, as he said, maybe we take that over the tackle. Well, we talked about that in the VCast afterwards, whether he should have went straight up the middle with that. As Childs becomes more of a veteran player, he might be able to make his own call on that, or he'd get up there quicker like they want it to, like they work on it. So there's a lot of things in terms of operation, or as they say, execution, that were not perfect for that situation. So 4th and 1, I had no problem with them going for it. It would have been nice if you're a Michigan State fan to look back on it and say, kick a field goal there if you make the field goal. Tied up 3-3, then the game restarts, which I understand.
They've
but
made
Smith,
field goals all season long.
Right. So they're due to miss one. So Smith, but that's if you make it. Now, but Smith said, I like what Smith's saying when he was interviewed during the game. He didn't come out and say it, but they probably assumed Ohio State was going to score at least 28. That with their offense. So like he said, kicking field goals, you're not going to win this game kicking field goals. You can get back to even, but to win the game, they needed 7 there. Also Lindgren said that it was a little bit longer of a yard than they thought initially, because that was a long yard for a sneak. So there were a lot of things there. So can you call timeout? It's first half, spend a timeout, why not? I think timeouts in the first half go unused too much. Call some timeouts, I don't know, but all those things are in the category of execution.
I just don't know about a quick, hindsight's 20/20 obviously, but I don't know about a quick play for a young quarterback, and you got, like young offensive linemen out there.
It helps a sneak if it goes quick.
Well, I know it helps a sneak, but things like we've seen a lot of people try to go fast. Like, and this Lindgren's operation is different than the past operations, but it just seems like sometimes when you go quickly and you don't have guys that are used to repping things quickly all the time in games, and it might work great in practice, I'm sure it does, but in games it's a different type of animal. And if you have Oregon State's offensive line from a year ago, which is super veteran. You get a veteran quarterback, veteran running backs, you get the whole veteran operation. It's a little bit different, than doing it with Aiden Childs against Ohio State. Now, I'm not saying that it was wrong to go for it in 4th and 1, but
I see why they did. They felt they needed to score touchdowns because Ohio State's going to score a lot.
I just don't know if they need to do it quick. But bottom line for me is it's hindsight's 20/20. But you got to do better executing those type of plays, and against teams like you got to be very, very efficient. Michigan State hasn't been.
Jack Velling with the fumble. Lindgren was asked about the red zone situation and whether there's commonality in it. He mentioned ball security. Now Childs with a face mask, I don't know if that could have been any better, but Velling was keeping it loose, whereas Jordan Turner on his interception had it high and tight. They liked his ball security.
Oh man, that was
ironic that a linebacker would have better ball security than a tight end and penetrating the 20-yard line on that. Jack Velling, no one feels worse than he does, but he's due to do some things in the second half or in the red zone, and that's going to happen. And Michigan State's getting there. I can't even remember what went wrong in the red zone against Boston College. I can't even remember. I'm a little bit tired. I can't really remember.
Interceptions.
But there was the deep interception at the end. I can't remember what the other ones were. Field goals ended up being field goals at Boston College. So on defense, the injury thing crept up on Michigan State as well with Malik Spencer and Angelo Gross being out, and then you had Amarion Smith in there. At safety, and true freshman Justin Denson goes in there, plays about 25 snaps. So when Denson goes in there, Nakai Martinez becomes the slot. So essentially, Nakai Martinez takes Gross's place, and you end up with Denson back there with Spencer. Sometimes it was Denson with Smith. And Denson and Amarion Smith played the same amount of snaps. And I thought it was interesting yesterday when Jonathan Smith said, Justin Denson's going to play. I suspect that when they grade that out, that Denson as a true freshman showed a pretty high ceiling. There was one play where he comes in, one of the runs that they gained yardage on during that drive when they went up 31-7. It was that fumbled snap, and crowd goes crazy because they've been making some stops. Travion Henderson picks it up, turns the corner, gains 10, 12 yards, I think. Denson came up, saw the fumble, goes at the cheese real hard, because there's a problem, picks it up. Now it's a pursuit angle. And Henderson could fly.
Right.
So you got a true freshman. That's a learning moment for him. But he hit hard, tackled hard, did some good things. Didn't really get a chance to see him in coverage much. Amarion Smith had a couple, tough situations in coverage. Smith, of course, has a lot on his plate right now. But I think Denson, I don't know if those snaps would be 50-50 between those two going forward. I wonder if Denson moves ahead in terms of being the next guy up there if Gross and Spencer continue to be dinged up a little bit.
I think one of my perceptions of Denson coming in is, you don't know necessarily what a guy can do physically, and that's what you want to see. And so if he can go out there and do it in a game against a physical team like Ohio State, my thinking is they probably thought the coverage was ahead of. When you see a coach get excited about a young guy, when he does one thing particularly well, it's probably because they thought the other thing was ahead of, the coverage was ahead of the physicality. So if you show the physicality piece, you also feel like you have the physical tools to do some coverage things, that's probably a positive. But, we've seen on both sides of the ball, they have shown no qualms about playing young players, and that's something that you need to do when you're rebuilding a program.
All right. Just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for their deposits. Today, only 73% are being redeemed. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on the environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts all of us. Help the environment, help yourself, take them back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. Those bottles and cans, take them back, get them recycled. It's a message from Shupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. So now you got Oregon going out there. You're going out to Oregon. Michigan State facing two top 10 teams early in the season. Chances are, a lot of people, outsiders, are expecting Michigan State to lose. I'll be curious. I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse, but if they do lose again, drop to 3-3, can they hold together? Anthony Jones had a speech to the team after the Ohio State game about the importance of keeping it together. I would hope that they continue to stay with the smaller picture and the bigger picture, work on what you can do for the bigger picture, and not get carried away with the scoreboard, as Saban would say. That's assuming that they might lose. I'm still watching Oregon. I'm not going to go out and say for sure that that's going to happen. Oregon had some problems earlier in the year against Idaho and against Boise State. They've done better since then. So I'm not ruling out the possibility of Michigan State winning this game. On a neutral site, I give Michigan State a solid chance to win if they play like that. But the team and a lot of new players. What's your sense on how the team's going to be able to stay together through this gauntlet as it's just getting to the halfway point?
Not worried about that. Not worried about them staying together. You got a bye week after this. These guys have been. I mean, all this. This is why they put in as much as they did to team building in the offseason and staying together and working about learning about people, and because they knew this was going to be hard. They knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I think. These guys have done a nice job, and they play hard and they play for each other, and I'm not worried about that. But you got to continue to put things out there that you can build on, and you got to have the feeling that you're moving forward and that you're building towards something. And yeah, it's a gauntlet. The two toughest teams in this gauntlet, in my opinion, for what Michigan State is right now, are like Ohio State and Oregon, just because they're potentially really explosive, where they can really kind of get out on you quickly. A week off. And then go back to playing Iowa. I think that's going to be, to me, that's a game that'll be the barometer game. Everyone talks about, hey, the barometer game being like these two. I think to see where Michigan State's at, to see where their season is headed, the Iowa game is a huge barometer game, and I'm not worried about these guys kind of like falling apart, because I think they've done a nice job with the culture. It hasn't been lip service. They've done a lot of things at the player level, at the coach level, to make sure that the culture is in the right place. And frankly, a lot of the guys that might have been issues with the culture are no longer in the program. Mm-hmm. So, I think Michigan State is building. I still, you saw today, there's a lot of confidence out there. I'm not worried about that. It's not going to be easy this week. And one of the reasons why Boise State did such a nice job against Oregon is they can run the heck out of the football. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you want to look at where Boise State is. Their run game operation is well ahead of where Michigan State's is or was. Now, on the flip side, I think Oregon's probably getting better against the run. Boise State with that tailback and that aggressive run game got Oregon in like the first game of the year, second game of the year, and that's not a good time to play like a really good running football team. So. Again, Michigan State's got to work on. They did some really good things going back to the Ohio State game with the run early on. If they can get those kind of tailback runs against Oregon State or Oregon, and they can stay on schedule, that's going to be important. I think one of the other things to watch in this is, we don't think of Oregon as a rivalry game, but for guys like Aiden Childs, it is, and you don't want him to go into that. Play hero ball or try to do too much. He did a nice job of taking his foot off the accelerator, throwing the ball out of bounds more than we've seen him against Ohio State than we've seen him in other games. He's got to do the same thing against Oregon, because they will things can't snowball quickly there. And I don't know if there's some plays you can run for him like that early on and against Ohio State. They had the nice quarterback design run where he had it. I think that took some pressure off him early on. Gets the adrenaline out of your system a little bit, but he's got to try to continue to play within himself. And to me, that'll be the barometer for him, is whether he can do some of the same things he did well against Ohio State, bring it on the road against the Oregon team, which he doesn't like and which he wants to make a statement against. And sometimes those backfire when you want a game too badly. We've seen that over the years. But can Aiden Childs play within himself and and be the first half version of Aiden Childs against Ohio State? If he could do that for 4 quarters against Oregon, and Michigan State can run the football respectively, I think some people might be surprised at how competitive this game is.
I agree. There are scenarios in this game by which Michigan State could remain competitive and really give them a scare, if not pull a big surprise. There's also scenarios in which it could end up being like one of those trips to Iowa where you just kind of get ambushed and it snowballs, and you're a pretty good team, but it just gets out of control. Those things can happen too. And for their sake, for them and what they're trying to build and trying to keep all the hearts and minds together, which, like you said, I think they're in good shape in that regard. For their sake, I hope that doesn't happen. That can happen. But an ambush, a misleading type of ambush is possible. And I'd be, if you're a Michigan State fan, you hope that doesn't happen. As far as Childs, there was one. He had the 2 bad passes in the second half, and the one was on the 3rd and 14, And the reason that came about was another one of those negative plays on a 1st and 10. They lost 4 yards. Outside zone, and Brandon Baldwin at right guard did not get the guy reached. He goes in there. Number 56, I think it is, the guy from Ohio, from Pickerington, Ohio, who we said in the pre-snap read was a legit defensive tackle, even though he's a 3-star guy. He was a 3-star in-state guy that was legit. And when I watched that defensive tackle, I think he picked up that it was going to be a stretch that way, and he just beat Baldwin that way. He even got sideways to do it. So I think that was a veteran play by him. Anyway, you're still giving up 4 yards, a loss of 4, then you're 2nd and 14, incompletion, 3rd and 14, then he almost throws that interception. It was ruled an interception, then it was overturned. When I saw that play originally, I'm like, what the heck decision is that? I mean, he throws a trajectory on that like a jump shot. When I watched it again, he did have like a slight Doug Flutie, Johnny Manziel chance to get it to K'Ron Lynch-Adams in traffic to catch it. I don't know how much he could have done with it afterwards, but the decision was not as crazy as I thought at the time. The accuracy on it, of course, was he overthrew him and it almost was intercepted. That one I didn't have as much a problem with when I looked at it again. But like you said, you have to stay, don't get unbridled, throw it out of bounds, and don't make a bad situation worse. But he does have some of that Manziel in him that he thinks he can always make a play. So getting the proper happy median and all that, I don't know when and how that's going to shake out. But he remained dangerous, and we've been using that word all year to describe him. Interestingly, Ryan Day in the pregame interview on the telecast right before kickoff used that word. He said Aiden Childs is dangerous. Everyone that prepares to play Michigan State knows that's the case. We're going to get some rain. We better shut it off right now. For Konyndyk, Jim Comparoni, it's going to start raining here. East Lansing, Michigan, covering the Spartans. You're watching the VCast. Weather's rolling in. SpartanMag.com.